Hi, ladies. So I'm super excited to be on live, and I am talking today about getting through the holidays and tips for getting through the holidays and what to do when you're triggered socially. So I know social eating for so many women is a huge trigger. And so many of my clients struggle with it. This has come up again and again, and so I thought I'd do a live video on it to just get some tips out there so you can kind of take what you want, what resonates with you, and really work it this holiday season. So I'm experimenting with a new light. I got this handy little light. Whoa. So I'm attaching it to my phone. I don't know if it's gonna work. I'll have to watch the replay and figure out. I'm like blinding myself as I'm looking into the camera. So how this live video works, and if you're watching the recording, thank you for watching, but if you're live, you can comment. So there should be like a little chat box in your, on the phone. So I've never actually watched a live video. I don't think, have I? Maybe I have. But you can comment and ask questions. So that's the whole point of live videos, that you can interact with me and the other women on the call. So pop in your comments, ask questions if you have anything along the way. I'd be happy to weigh in, something that you're struggling with, something you need clarity on. Hey, Joanne. So that's why I've been trying to do more live videos, and in my Free with Food membership group, I do live videos all the time because I just love the interaction and I love being live, and it's like, I can see you, you can see me, we can interact. So anyway, so in the States, it is Thanksgiving on Thursday, and I thought it would be a good time to just kind of get into the holiday season with all right, tips. How do we stay normal eating over Thanksgiving into the holidays? Because I feel like it starts to get tricky, and it starts to get like, all right, I'm trying to work with food and be normal, listen to my hunger and fullness and all the stuff that we talk about in here. And it's like you're challenged all the time because there's dinners and social events and gatherings and happy hours and work parties. And you're just like, oh my gosh, enough. Okay, so I'm not sure. I didn't plan for exactly how long this would go. I'm thinking like 20 to 30 minutes. But sometimes I start to ramble. So if I start to ramble, just type in the chat box, you're rambling. So anyway, I have 4 little holiday tips, and I'll expand on each of them. And then I wanted to get into the social piece of it. So I thought this would be a really good foundation to work on. So getting through the holidays. One of the most important things is planning ahead. And so a lot of times when we have an event or we have a dinner, like Thanksgiving Day is a perfect example. And if there's an equivalent holiday in your own country, use that example. It's like we save up. Everyone in my family does this. I usually go to Pittsburgh for Thanksgiving, and it's like everyone is saving up for the big meal. And it's like, all right, I can't eat a lot, and maybe have a little tiny breakfast, and then all day it's like, oh, we're gonna eat a huge meal. I'm gonna eat a lot of pie, so I'm just saving up. So by the time dinner comes, you guessed it, it's like you're ravenous. Anything looks good. You inhale your food because you're so hungry, and then you're just eating through all the desserts because you're just like, I can't stop myself. So one of the reasons planning ahead helps is because you look at it as a normal day leading up to the event, a normal day. So essentially you're planning your food, you're planning, okay, I'm eating every 3 to 4 hours. I'm, maybe having a snack before dinner so I don't arrive starving. Maybe I plan out my meals and just take that extra care to plan things out, because what this does is you become conscious, you become aware of what you're doing, and it allows you to focus more. So it's like, not going to an event hungry is so important. And it's usually the opposite that we think is true. Like, come to an event hungry because there's gonna be so much food. So we want to practice the opposite. Come to an event or come to dinner or come to the gathering, whatever it is, you're not so hungry that you're not even listening to the people talking. You're just like, how can I, dig into that bowl of stuffing and satisfy my hunger, because it is at a 10 on the hunger scale. So have something, have a snack before dinner. The time leading up, plan out your meals. You're going to have breakfast. A couple hours later, you're going to have a light lunch. Maybe you have another mini meal at 3 p.m. Whatever it is, structure your day so it sets you up for that meal, because it allows you to arrive at a place where you can make smarter choices. So when you're at the place where you're just ravenous and you're like, oh my God, I can't even think, your mind is not dominating your choices. It's a physical pull, it's a physical urge, it's a biochemical reaction of my blood sugar is so low, I need to eat right now. So it's like, it doesn't matter what the food is. Usually we opt for the sugariest, highest carb because that's what digests quickest in our body. So, moral of the story, plan ahead and eat ahead. So what, don't feel like, allow yourself to get out of that mindset of saving up. And because thinking back to the times you have saved up, typically it ends up in a binge, or it ends up that we're stuffed and we overeat and we're like, oh my God, how did I do this to myself again? I'm such a failure. Like, I'm starting over tomorrow. We get the whole thing going in our head. So when you can plan ahead, prepare your day, especially on the day of a holiday when you're going to have a big meal or you have a big event around food, like eating something, for breakfast, a light lunch, a medium to even maybe a heavier snack or mini meal in the afternoon before the event, before the dinner. So a lot of times also what I'll do is try and eat like a lot of vegetables, a lot of lean proteins before, let's say, Thanksgiving dinner, because I know Thanksgiving dinner typically is very heavy foods, very carb rich, very, stuffings and pies and green bean casserole and like heavier stuff, mashed potatoes with butter. So I'll try and eat like, get in lots of veggies and lean protein. So I've already, my body already feels satisfied. My body already feels like it's gotten some nutrients, it's gotten some nourishment. And so the heavier foods don't disturb my system as much, if that makes sense. Okay, so the first is plan ahead. And just prepare your foods throughout the day and just start to think about it. Like being conscious of, I am going to do this and this is how I'm going to structure my day, whereas maybe you're not as structured typically, that can be helpful. And trust me, like, you will get resistance from family members. Like my dad always says to me, we're going to be eating dinner soon. You shouldn't spoil your appetite. And I'm like, Dad, I'm not 16 anymore. I can manage my own appetite. So, like you will get pushback and resistance because the typical mindset of most people is, I've got to save up, I've got to save up, I've got to save up. Like this is the event, I'm going to save up for everything so I can just gorge myself and then not feel as bad. But we all know how that goes. You end up feeling bad or worse or horrible, and then you kind of go down that path. Hey, Shauna, just saw that you joined. So, okay, so that's number one. The second is eating in small doses. So by that, I mean, so think about like when you're sitting down for a holiday meal or you're at an event with food and you're like, you pack your plate. It's like a big plate and you're caught up in the just the momentum and the frenzy and the sort of, I wouldn't say fast pace, but it's like, noise and there's lots of people talking, conversations going, and you're much less likely to pay attention to what you're eating, and you're much less likely to sort of like tune into hunger and fullness. So when you have a smaller plate or you take less food, at first, it forces you to pay attention because when you finish that plate, you're like, okay, I have to consciously go reach for seconds. So a lot of times we're so distracted and we're so caught up in the event or the holiday or the people or the conversation, the noise, the ambiance, the environment, that it's harder to be mindful and it's harder to check in with ourselves. So having a smaller plate or having, Shauna says, true, I just binge on holidays. Yes. And so go back and listen to that first tip because that'll help you not binge on the holidays. But like taking smaller portions consciously, and maybe you don't do this typically, but for holidays it can be a really good tip because it forces you to just tune in more, like check in with yourself around, oh, my plate's done, like am I actually hungry? So that kind of leads me into the third piece is like have cues for yourself. So, and what I mean by this is like, while we might not be able to be as mindful or to check in as much as we would if we were by ourselves or if we're in our regular routine, it's like reminding yourself, like having cues. And so for me, a lot of times what I'll do is like when I finish, like, so I have, mashed potatoes and stuffing and turkey and whatever else on my plate. Like when I finish one food, and this might not work for people who eat like bites of everything, but I usually eat like stuffing and then the turkey and then this and this, and I'll like just check in, do a quick like, okay, how am I feeling? Am I still hungry? Where am I? What's my body doing? How am I feeling? Because it reminds me, like I've gotten in the habit at big meals, big events to just check in with myself after I've finished one component of the meal. And that can be a good thing to do with like when you have a salad or an appetizer, then you move on to like a soup or something, and then you have the main course. It's like after you're finished each component or each serving, just do a check-in and be like, am I hungry? How am I feeling? Like, am I triggered socially? Which we'll get into kind of in the next section of this. But like, do I need more? Am I just feeling like I need more because everyone's still here eating? Like, what's like take the temperature of your body and how you're feeling. And I will say the checking in with your body is much easier when you're doing it day to day. So getting that practice day to day of like, how am I feeling? Am I hungry? All the stuff we learned in the Normal Eater Challenge of like hunger, fullness, satisfaction, all that stuff. And use that practice and solidify it. And then when you have a holiday, you have an event, it's like using the cues as a check-in. And even if you need to get up from the table and just excuse yourself, like, okay, excuse me, gotta go to the bathroom, or like, let me just go in the kitchen. Anybody need a refill on the drinks, whatever. But like, removing yourself from the situation can be a big one. To just like get out of, because it's like family can be triggering, and like everyone's talking, your Aunt Susie says something and you like get livid, and it's like there's so much going on that you might have to remove yourself to just check in and be like, okay, where am I? What is going on here? So the fourth thing is mindfulness, and mindfulness kind of ties hand in hand for the purpose of this little workshop talk thing with allowing, because if we go in with the mindset that, okay, this is a holiday, I'm going to overeat, I'm going to binge, this is my cheat day, I'm just going to, go crazy, and then tomorrow I'm just going to start over. It's like, that is what we want to move away from, because it gets us in that cycle of having to start over. And then what happens when you start over? It's like you're on the wagon, and then when you're on the wagon, there's no choice but at some point to fall off the wagon. And so when you can look at a holiday, yes, as a special occasion, but not as a reason or an excuse to like go crazy around food. And I mean, I am like so familiar with this pattern. Every Thanksgiving or every Christmas or anything that I celebrated, it was like, all right, I'm just gonna like, just go crazy. And then the next day, be like, all right, I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna cut out carbs, I'm gonna diet, I'm gonna restrict, whatever the pattern was for me at the time. But it's the sense that it gives you a reason to binge, and we don't want that. Like, we want to have the days leading up, like you're still eating regularly and you're still working on hunger and fullness, and you're still allowing the days leading up. You're not, working out 60 hours a day and eating nothing but salad so you can save up for Thanksgiving dinner. It's like still that gentle allowing of, okay, yes, this is a special occasion and there may not be foods that I typically eat, but using it as a reason to eat food that you don't typically eat. Like, stuffing is awesome, and I only have it once a year. Mashed potatoes I don't eat very often. Pie I rarely eat because, I don't make pie. No one ever makes pie. So it's like using that as a reason to enjoy foods you typically wouldn't, and giving yourself that permission to do so. And that's where the mindfulness comes in, is that, like, you don't need to stay away completely from everything. You don't need to like shut yourself in the other room while like everyone's enjoying pie. But at the same time, know that it doesn't take 4 pieces of pie to truly satisfy someone. So it's like the mindfulness comes in when you're like really tasting and enjoying and putting your fork down and being in the environment and engaging in conversation. Because like, when you're slowing down, when you're tasting, when you're savoring, that apple pie becomes filling, it becomes satisfying, becomes so like you can fully savor it. So it's like, and maybe you experiment, like maybe you take a little sliver of pie and like eat that slowly, mindfully, allow yourself to do it, and then check in and be like, how am I doing? Because typically when we're truly in that experience and not triggered, which I'll get into next, by like, by aunt, grandma, mom, sister, whoever, that's when the deliciousness, the satisfaction, the like, yes, this is exactly what I need and no more. Okay, to recap, the holiday tips. Planning ahead and making sure you're eating regularly and often before the dinner, and even having a snack before the dinner if you need to. Eating in small doses, so having a small plate, or cutting back on your portions so you can kind of just, use that as a way to not get distracted and just like, shovel everything in because it's just like you're caught up in the frenzy and the momentum. Having cues. So whether that's getting up from the table, whether that's when you're done with a component of the meal, like having cues to check in with yourself. So maybe that's every like 5 bites, every time you remember to put your fork down, like whatever it is, having something for you to check back in and say, how am I doing? Like, am I hungry? Am I nearing full? Am I full? Like, what is going on for me inside, emotionally, mentally, physically, or all three? And what's my next decision? Like, do I want more mashed potatoes? Like, do I want more soup? Whatever it is. And then the mindfulness and allowing is the 4th piece. So just allowing yourself, truly understanding that this isn't permission to binge, permission to like go crazy, but it's permission to recognize that, wow, like this is once a year or, twice a year where I have these foods and really enjoying them and being like, yes, like this stuffing is delicious and I'm going to have a whole heaping spoonful of it. Okay. So those are sort of just some general holiday tips. And honestly, like try them out. If you're in the States and you're celebrating Thanksgiving, like try them out. Let me know how it goes. Post in the group if you need help. If you're like that worked, that I need a little bit more help on that, like post them. I know this is a hard month, like now into, after Christmas and Hanukkah. Actually, I just saw that Hanukkah starts first day of Hanukkah is the same day as Christmas. Anyway, regardless of what holiday you're celebrating, this time of year can be a little bit more challenging because we're always like, oh, I'll just go crazy in December. And then like January 1st, I'm starting back up and we don't want to do that. Okay. So social triggers. Hold on. I'm really thirsty, I realized. Okay. So what do you do when you get triggered socially? Honestly, this is something that it takes practice, but understanding that you get better at it. Like you get, just like all of this stuff, it might seem really unfamiliar at first and really like, oh my gosh, that's really uncomfortable. But you get better and better as you keep working through these triggers. So I was chatting with a client the other day and she was talking about, she went out to lunch with her daughter and another woman, and this woman that just like triggers her, really, really triggers her. And she ended up overeating because she realized that like so much stuff was coming up for her and was so uncomfortable. And she was so funny. She was like, well, if I had a choice, like I would have stood up on the table and like freaked out and yelled at her and then like left the restaurant. And she's like, that wasn't really an option. So I just had to like be triggered and eating. So we're going to talk about that. And I just thought that was a funny story because it is. It's like we get triggered and we're like, oh my God, what do we do? Like, where do we go? We can't leave. Like, we can't leave the family gathering. Like, what do we do? So the first thing is to understand that being triggered is uncomfortable. Like it is very, I was just going to say it's very discomfort. That is totally not a correct English. It's filled with a lot of discomfort. So when you immediately feel triggered, like you feel that physical reaction almost of like, oh my God, you just like, whether it's an emotion, whether it's a thought, like you get that like, oh my God, like I'm so physically triggered. So allowing that to be there without immediately going to the food is like, it will be uncomfortable because if your automatic reaction is to just feel that and then go have the cookie, go have the extra helping of this, get into the pie, like whatever it is, then of course it's going to be uncomfortable to not have that reaction. So that first step is the awareness, like creating space around the trigger and then that automatic reaction. So starting to catch yourself like, oh my God, I feel insanely triggered right now. Like I'm just going to like allow it. I'm going to create space for it. I'm not going to immediately act on it. And I'm going to realize that being uncomfortable, and so much of this stuff on this journey is like, just because you're uncomfortable, just because it feels new and different and unfamiliar does not mean that there's something wrong or that you're a failure or that like you're doing it wrong. What it means is that we are taught to run away from discomfort, like run away from discomfort, like onto your phone, into the food, like going shopping, working 70 million hours a week, like whatever it is, we are taught to run away from discomfort and from like anytime it gets comfortable, like no, thank you. Like, I don't want to be there. So I wouldn't say it's fun to be in discomfort, but it's like separating the thought of like, oh my God, I'm uncomfortable. Like, the thought of just going down that path. So let's say you're your grandma triggers you, your mom triggers you. Moms are good triggers sometimes. So many of my clients are like, their mom is their biggest trigger. And I'm like, that's so sad. Although my mom was a big trigger too. But anyway, so it's like you, let's say your mom makes a comment of like, about your weight, about something, I don't know. And you get triggered. It's like, you feel that physical trigger feeling, but then your mind is like, you're like, oh my God, like what a biatch. Like, you think all these like mean, horrible thoughts about your mom. And then that gets so uncomfortable that like you go into the food. And so it's a lot of times our thoughts are just perpetuating the feeling. It's like back and forth feeding into each other, and it gets so overwhelming that of course we're going to go into the food because it feels so awful. So when you can separate that story in your head from like the physical feeling, it becomes much easier to just deal with that feeling. And so the second piece of this is exploring the feeling. And sometimes this may not happen in the moment, but it still can be a step in the process. So step 2 and step 3 may be interchangeable depending on the situation. So like if you're at the dinner table and there's 20 people and you're all sitting there having Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever dinner, maybe you can't actually even go home because you're really triggered. But in general, like exploring the feeling, and let me tell you a quick story because I think stories really illustrate some of this stuff. One of the women I'm working with, she travels a lot for work, and she like 2 or 3 times a week she'll be in a hotel room, and like she would always buy food in preparation for the feeling of loneliness. Like she didn't want to feel lonely. She knew she would feel lonely, so she bought food as like a comfort, like candy or chocolate bars or whatever. And this was her habit. Like it was just all the time. It was just, okay, this is what I do. I go to the store, I get chocolate, I get candy, and then I go into my hotel room, and then I eat it, and then I feel bad about myself. And so what I had her do was really explore the loneliness. And we had this amazing conversation because she was like, well, actually, I've never felt the loneliness. Like, I've never felt that feeling. Like, I don't know what it feels like. I don't know what it feels like to be lonely. Like, I don't know if I would actually be lonely because I've never even given myself a chance to be lonely. Like, she'd always eaten to sort of like stave off the loneliness, like just in case she was going to feel lonely because she thought she would. So it's so interesting because so many of the feelings that we don't feel or that we're afraid to feel or that we run away from feeling are like we've never actually given ourselves a chance to feel them. Like, what does being so angry at your mom feel like? Like, what does being lonely feel like? What does being frustrated or overwhelmed or stressed out, like, what does it feel like physically? Like, where is it? Is it like in your body? Is it thoughts? Like, is it in your belly? Is it in your chest? Like, is it tightness? Is it like, what is it, the feeling? And what's interesting about that is when she gave herself a chance, I was like, text me, like, walk me through what you're feeling. And what surprised her was that like she felt lonely, but she was like, oh, like, I just feel lonely. Like, it was just sort of this startling revelation of that it didn't mean anything. It was just like, okay, I had this feeling of loneliness. Like, it's not a big deal. I'll be going home in 2 days. So my point is that a lot of times, like, exploring the feeling, like, what is really going on here? And B, what does it feel like physically? Like, what is the physical reaction? Because remember that emotions are just energy. Without the mental story, they're just physical energy that has to be released. So the third piece of this, and again, 2 and 3 can be interchangeable. There may not be time in the moment when you're triggered to explore the feeling and journal and meditate, and I totally get that. So that might be for later. Like, sometimes even for me, if I get triggered somewhere, it's and I can't in the situation deal with it, like I'll like compartmentalize it. Like, okay, I might still be a little off, but I'll like put it off in my head and like come back to it later so I can deal with it and look at whatever was triggering me. But the third piece of this is having options in how you, like, having a game plan almost. So when you feel really triggered and you feel that physical like urge to just dive into whatever food is in front of you or seek out a food or whatever, having a game plan. So what I mean by this is like texting someone, calling your best friend, pulling your sister, your partner, or someone aside, like at the gathering and just being like, all right, I got to vent really quickly. Going to the bathroom, taking a couple deep breaths, like going out for a walk, like going to take one of the kids that are there and like go off and play with the kid. Like, what is your game plan to when you get triggered? Like if you can't deal with the feeling and explore the feeling in that moment, like what can you do to just sort of bring yourself down, like just calm yourself for a little bit and then come back to the situation. I found this to be really, really helpful because a lot of times it just gives us some space between that reaction. So like if you get triggered and your automatic reaction is to binge, to overeat, to just like, go like frantically inhale to make that feeling go away, removing yourself from the situation can give you some space to just like calm down for a second. And so let me just kind of recap here. So understanding that it will be uncomfortable. So being triggered socially is uncomfortable, and that doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It just means that it's new, it's unfamiliar, and you're now dealing with that feeling instead of dealing with overeating and then being mad at yourself because you overate. The second and third are interchangeable, but the second being exploring that feeling. So like what is going on? What is like the root of that feeling? So a lot of times, like for the example, if your mom makes a comment, you're like, oh my gosh, like my mom, she just never says anything nice to me, blah, blah, blah. And you go on this story about your mom, but it's like, let's look deeper and see like, well, what am I really upset about? Like my mom's comment about my weight made me feel insecure. Like I don't feel insecure. I don't feel secure. I don't feel confident. So it's like, what is the root feeling that we're truly feeling, and looking at that, exploring that. And then the third is having a game plan. So having like some options, a go-to person. Like my sister, like my older sister is always like, I give her that look and I'm like, let's go for a walk. Like so-and-so is driving me insane and like, let me talk about this. Like going out for a walk, going to the bathroom. Like in the beginning when I like didn't have a game plan, I would literally go to the bathroom. Like if I was out to eat with friends, if I was somewhere like that I wasn't comfortable, I would literally be like, all right, I'm just gonna run to the restroom, like go to the bathroom and like just take some deep breaths, like close my eyes, just breathe so I could kind of just bring myself down, because I didn't, the trigger to reaction of food was so ingrained that I needed to physically leave, to be like, okay, let me just calm down. Like, even if I don't fix or solve or explore whatever is triggering me right now, I'm just going to remove myself for a little bit, like just ground myself and come back. So even if it's like 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like, if you're at a big gathering, no one will even know that you're gone. So texting someone, calling someone, So that kind of stuff, like anything that involves like you getting away, you talking to a person, grabbing someone from the gathering, like can really help you just create some space around the trigger that you're triggering, trigger that is triggering you or something. Okay, so the last thing I want to say about being triggered socially is being triggered, and you might not want to hear this, but it's such an opportunity to look at your own stuff. So in the beginning, my younger sister sold Herbalife, or does sell Herbalife, and it used to be like the biggest trigger for me, because it was marketing as a weight loss coach and shakes and helping people like feel better about themselves, but to me it wasn't, because it was still weight loss. The whole thing like was so triggering to me, and I'm like, no, you can't talk about nutrition. Like, I have my master's in nutrition, like you can't be a nutrition coach. So like just so much stuff used to trigger me. So what I realized is that and now it doesn't really trigger me. I mean, maybe every once in a while I'm like, oh gosh, she's drinking that shake again. But like, or when she does a before and after picture, that's what gets me. But it's like my opportunity to look at my own stuff. Like, what is it inside of me that my button is pushed? And I think when we're triggered socially, it's like when someone makes a comment, or when we're like just getting that emotion, when we're feeling something really strongly and we blame the other person, it's like, what is going on inside of us that we can look at? Because we can never change anyone. We can never change. I'm never going to change my sister and what she does. Like, that's her path and that's her life. So what is it within me? I'll tell you another story. I've been dating the same guy for about 4.5 years, and it used to trigger me so much when people would always ask, when do you get engaged? When do you get engaged? When do you get engaged? And it would I would have to leave, because I would just get so worked up about it. And just, it would feel so uncomfortable. And so I started working on what is going on inside of me that's triggering me? Like, where am I? Am I insecure about something? Do I think we should be engaged by now or married or whatever? And so it's a chance to look at your stuff and to see what feeling needs to be processed, what your hot button issue is to work through. And I know that doesn't sound very fun, but it actually is really freeing. Like, it's freeing to realize that you can be triggered at an event, at a social gathering, at a holiday, and be like, okay, like, I don't have to hate Aunt Susie forever because she said that to me. I can look at my stuff. I can look at what hot button this is triggering within me and work on that instead of blaming or being like, oh, I'm never going to talk to her again because, you know, she said that to me. So that's sort of like, sometimes it's hard to hear, like, well, no, it's not me, it's them. Like, they said it, they made that comment, you know, they shouldn't have done that. But it's like, we'll never change. You know, yes, maybe the appropriate response is to talk with them or say, you know, hey, I didn't really appreciate your comment, or, you know, have a conversation with someone if it's not appropriate. At the same time, though, it's like, we can only do that from a place of calmness and like groundedness, and like not when we're emotional and triggered and like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that, and you go like freak out on her, and then like you ruin the whole family gathering. So anyway, that's kind of a long tangent, but okay. So thanks for showing up live. Pop in the questions if you have any questions. If you came in late, watch the first part about the tips for the holidays. And if you have so I know being triggered and binging socially is like a massive topic. So if you have a question about something that I didn't touch on, just pop it in the chat box, and, you know, I'll come back to it later. But yeah, you know, feel free, honestly, like, ask your questions. If this week, if you struggle, if you're in the States, you have Thanksgiving. If you're not in the States and you're still struggling, you know, absolutely pop in and ask your questions, and I'd be happy to weigh in. I just realized I always use like the term, I'll be happy to weigh in, and it's like, no pun intended, but like maybe, because like weigh in, I don't know. But I always use that term, and I'm like, is that like really the best use of words? So anyway, happy Thanksgiving if you're in the States. So next Tuesday, I'm going to be doing an emotional eating workshop, little video too. And I haven't decided if it will be like a webinar or this live video type of thing. I love the live videos, but it's harder to talk, like to get into it more, because like I'm just staring at myself talking. So it's kind of distracting. Whereas on like a webinar, there's slides that like I'm not staring at myself. So anyway, thank you so much. And I hope you are having a good day and a good week. And I think that's it. But yes, honestly, if you have anything, any questions, pop in the chat box. I'd love to hear from you. Okay. Have a good rest of your night.